We got a 215-pound catch weight here as Modestas Bukauskas welcomes the short notice UFC debutant Christian Edwards. You got minus 335 on Bukauskas and plus 275 on Edwards. Now, starting off on the Bukauskas side of things, he had his winning streak snapped last time around at the hands of Nikita Krylov. Now, that's a fight where I picked Bukauskas to win as a slight favorite that night because I was impressed with the grappling defense we had been seeing from him. And once he stopped the first few takedowns from Krylov, I was like, hey, this is a fight that Bukauskas can actually go out there and win now because I expect him to hold a striking advantage. What I overlooked was the pace and pressure that Krylov was able to implement after his plan A failed, and he was really able to put the pace and pressure on Bukauskas and constantly disrupt the rhythm of the Lithuanian fighter, leading to Krylov going out there and just swarming Bukauskas and eventually getting that third round TKO. That was very discouraging as a guy that believed in Bukauskas' improvements. You know, he went 6-1 to start his return to the UFC before running into Nikita Krylov last time around. So he's now 6-2 since returning to the UFC. He's a solid fighter, very well-rounded. I think he does his best work when he can get into his groove with his striking, puts combinations together very well, engages in the clinch. We've seen him actually implement a grappling game in the past as well, so much so that he even got that submission victory over Marcin Prachnio in his first couple wins when he returned to the UFC. I think a large part of that can be attributed to him, training with those big guys in Europe now. Tom Aspinall, Phil DeFries, Simeon Powell has been training with those guys as well. I don't know if that training camp is still together, but there was a period of time where all those big bodies were working together, and it obviously benefited a lot of those guys considering how successful they've been. But Bukauskas, again, kind of underachieved in his last matchup. Let's see if he can actually bounce back here as he takes on the short notice Bellator veteran Christian Edwards. Now, I was very surprised that the UFC decided to bring Edwards into the fold. I don't know if he was just the best option available. The fact that this fight's not taking place at 205 makes me believe that there could have been other guys that would have made the weight class to get the short notice opportunity, but for some reason they ended up going with Christian Edwards. Now, Edwards is a guy, like I said, was a former Bellator prospect. He had a very solid start to his career. Then he ended his run with Bellator on a 3-fight losing streak, including losing by submission as a big favorite over Raheem Cleveland in his last matchup. In his last Bellator fight, that is. There's 2 fights now where he's fumbled the bag as a massive favorite. The first against Big Tuna Ben Parrish, then he lost to Grant Neal, I believe it was, and then the last one was obviously Raheem Cleveland. He went to the regional scene after that, got a knockout victory over an absolute bum in Jerome Hatch. Then he went up against former UFC fighter Jake Collier, who, if you guys remember, he used to be, I believe, a welterweight or middleweight back in the day. Then he had that crazy layoff where he had a ton of injuries, came back as an overweight heavyweight, had minimal success, went to the regional scene. Then he actually cut down to 205 pounds and actually looked in pretty good shape. But then unfortunately, Edwards was putting that grappling grind on him. And about 2.5 minutes into that first round, Edwards landed a takedown that injured the shoulder of Collier. So a little bit of an asterisk beside that win for Edwards. But he does have a win over a former UFC fighter. So there is that. He then got an opportunity to take on Luke Fernandez for a CFFC title. And obviously we know Fernandez got signed to the UFC through the Contender Series last season. And he was able to stop the takedowns of Edwards and pummel him on the feet, even having grappling success of his own in deeper water. Edwards was able to bounce back into the win column back in February as he took out a 4-0 prospect in Glendale Whitney. That was a fight where they were jockeying for position a lot for the first 2 to 3 minutes, but once it looked like Whitney had kind of blown his gas tank trying to get that position, Edwards was able to take over and eventually come up with a TKO win near the ending of the second round. Edwards is a decent fighter. He's 27 years old, trains out of Jackson Wink, often looks to utilize his approach with a grapple-heavy approach. He likes to get into the clinch, then from there looks for ways to get fights to the ground, and his top position is not that bad. I just think that when he can't get to his grappling, it really starts to suffer for him. And just as we saw in the Raheem Cleveland fight, he had really good success in that top position in the first round, then struggled to get into the second round. Third round, he struggled to get to there again, and he eventually put himself into a pretty bad submission there to get tapped out. So when he has the grappling success, he looks good. When he doesn't, and he can't sustain it past round 1, that's where you see him start to fall off. So in this matchup against Modestas Bukauskas, I like Bukauskas. I think he wins, but minus 335 is a little bit wide. Considering how smothering and how aggressive. We'll likely see Edwards with that grapple heavy game. It wouldn't surprise me if he can land a few takedowns on Bukauskas early. However, I think Bukauskas will show good enough grappling defense to quickly work back to his feet and then show the better cardio in the second and third rounds as he starts to put his striking and combinations together. I think he wins, but I don't think it's going to be as wide of a margin as minus 335. So I wouldn't be going out there and parlaying Bukauskas whatsoever, nor would I be taking a sprinkle on Edwards. I don't think Edwards is really UFC level. I think he kind of is a fringe UFC fighter at best. There might be a fight that he could pull out a victory in if they give him like Junior Tafa or something like that. That's definitely a fight that he can absolutely win. But in this one against Bukauskas just seems much more well-rounded, has a tougher strength of schedule, and should showcase good enough grappling defense. And I don't expect Edwards to put on a pressure in the striking game the way that Krylov did against Bukauskas last time around. So look for Bukauskas to defend early, then get to his striking advantage, and I believe he comes up with a second or third round TKO over the newcomer Christian Edwards.